You ever find yourself just lying in bed, not really doing anything, and that little voice in your head immediately starts calling you lazy? You want to be productive, you really do, but you just can't seem to make yourself move. It's so frustrating. Well, let's dive into this because there's a really good chance it's not what you think it is.
So let's just ask the big question right up front. Are you just being lazy, or are you completely and utterly exhausted? It's a question so many of us wrestle with, and that line between the two can feel incredibly blurry sometimes. But figuring out the difference, it's absolutely crucial.
You see, the alternative to just being lazy that we're talking about here is burnout. And the official definition is pretty clear. It's this really negative state of complete exhaustion. We're talking emotional, physical, and mental, and it's all caused by way too much stress for way too long. And get this is not some rare thing that only happens to a few people. A survey from a few years back found that a whopping 75% of adults in the US had dealt with symptoms of burnout. And you've got to imagine that number has only gone up since then.
So, how in the world do you tell them apart? Well, it really all boils down to one fundamental idea. Are we talking about a recent change in how you act, or is this a long-standing personality trait? And here it is, the core difference, side by side. Burnout is a change. It's a temporary state you've fallen into that's different from your normal self. Laziness, on the other hand, is seen as a stable trait, right? A consistent pattern of avoiding effort over a long period of time. So the most important question you can possibly ask yourself is, was I always this way? To help you answer that question, we're going to break down 6 telltale signs that what you're feeling is almost certainly burnout and not laziness. Okay, sign number 1. You feel this deep sense of being disconnected from everything. It's that strange, hollow feeling like you're just going through the motions of your own life, almost like you're on autopilot. There's actually a psychological term for this. It's called depersonalization. People who go through it often say they feel emotionally numb, totally empty, almost like they're a spectator watching their own life from the outside. And with that comes this constant, nagging feeling of helplessness, like you just can't get back in the driver's seat.
Now, sign number 2 is a big one, and it really forces you to look back into your past. So ask yourself this: did I used to be motivated? Was there a time when I was actually pretty driven, maybe even a high achiever?
This is where you can see the contrast so clearly. With burnout, there's always a distinct before and after. You were that self-motivated person, but now you just feel apathetic and drained. With laziness, there really isn't a before. It's just a consistent pattern over time.
All right, sign number 3 is all about passion, or more accurately, the loss of it. Think about the things that used to light you up and bring you joy. Your hobbies, sports, maybe even your work. This is honestly one of the cruelest parts of burnout. The very things you used to love can start to feel like a massive chore. Or even worse, you might start to resent them because you link them to the stress that got you to this point in the first place. Okay, sign number 4 is a big shift in your emotions. Do you find yourself suddenly snapping at people for no reason? Do you feel like your emotions are totally out of your control and you have no idea why?
And the emotional states here just couldn't be more different. Burnout often brings the sudden moodiness and irritability that feels totally new and out of character for you. Laziness, on the other hand, is usually associated with being more relaxed, kind of laid back and placid. Emotionally, they're practically opposites.
The 5th sign is one that people around you might notice first. You've started neglecting your self-care. And this isn't just about feeling tired. It's about a really noticeable drop in how you look after yourself. This can show up in a lot of different ways, right? Maybe your sleep schedule is a total mess, or you've stopped making an effort with your appearance. Maybe you're pulling away from your friends and turning down invitations. Even simple tasks start to feel completely draining. All of these are huge signs because they all point back to that one key idea: you weren't always this way.
Now, this brings us to our final sign, and honestly, it might be the most important one. All of these changes we've talked about, the disconnection, the lost motivation, the irritability, they don't just happen overnight.
So the 6th sign is simply recognizing that this was a gradual process. Burnout doesn't just flip a switch one day. It's more like a slow burn. It creeps up on you, developing over time through some pretty predictable stages.
Research has actually broken this down into 5 major stages.
It often starts with what's called the honeymoon phase. You're super optimistic, tons of energy for a new job or project. But then you hit the onset of stress, and that initial motivation starts to fade. If that stress just keeps going, it turns into chronic stress, and the symptoms get way worse. That's what leads directly to burnout, that state of total exhaustion. And if you don't address it, it can become habitual burnout, where this awful state just becomes your new normal, and it's so much harder to climb out of.
And understanding that path is just so important because it shows us exactly why catching these signs early on can make all the difference in the world.
I mean, listen to this quote from the source material. It really hits home. By the time you reach that final stage, burnout is so embedded in your life that the fatigue just gets more and more intense. And it's at this point that you become a lot more vulnerable to developing serious conditions like anxiety or depression.
But here's the good news. Here's the empowering part. Just being aware of this is the first most important step. By recognizing these signs, whether it's in yourself or in someone you care about, you can take action so much earlier, which makes recovery so much easier. It's not about being lazy. It's about a legitimate state of exhaustion that you can and you should get help for. So we'll end with this. Now that you know the signs, now that you can tell the difference between burnout and laziness, the final question is really just for you. How will you listen to what your exhaustion is trying to tell you?